This was back in 2014, and I was 16 years old at the time of this story. I was still in high school and I was in grade 11 at the time of this story. It started out in September with my dad at work while my mom was at a friend's house dancing. So I was alone with my brother, who is younger than me. I was on a computer playing a game on Facebook, to which I was enjoying a fun game. However, I can't remember the game I was playing, but I remembered it was a Wizard of Oz themed game. While I was on my computer, I was chatting with a few friends on Facebook. I wasn't allowed to get Facebook until July of 2014, and it was around the time my mom let me have social media like Facebook. She was paranoid as well as my dad, so they gave me some rules to follow while I have Facebook. The rules were like as follows: don't add people I don't know, only add people I know, etc. I have been following the rules, so my parents weren't too concerned about me breaking them. However, they wanted me to make sure that I was okay, and since then I'm on the autism spectrum. While my mom was dancing, it was on a Friday night, meaning it was the weekend. I was up most of the night. While I was making myself some dinner, I heard the house phone ring, to which it wasn't far from my computer. Now, most of the time the house phone would ring if it's just scammers, telemarketers, school, and people looking for my parents. This was before my mom and I had cell phones, so my dad was the only one with a cell phone at the time. I went to answer the phone, thinking it was someone trying to reach out to my dad or my mom. However, when I picked up the phone, I saw it was a phone number that I hadn't recognized or knew. "Hello?" I asked on the phone. It waited for a few moments before a voice was heard on the other line. "Hello, Bella. I'm Robin." Now, this man's voice was a Pakistani Indian accent, so I knew he was from either Pakistan or India. First of all, I know my dad knew someone by the name Robin, but he never told me who he was, since customers' cars he fixed come and go, so he doesn't keep track of all the names. Second, on to the first statement, I want to point out, my name isn't Bella. In fact, I first assumed this guy had called the wrong number, to which it has happened once in a while. I said to him on the phone that he must have called the wrong number. Since I didn't know who this guy was, he was making me feel uneasy. "Do I know you from somewhere?" I asked. "Yes, I go to the same school as you do." As soon as he said that, I was not only unsettled by this, but more confused. How could he have gone to my school? Was one question. But another question was, how did he manage to get my house number? As far as I know, I only give out my land phone number to close friends that I considered close and I trust. However, being a teenager at the time, I went along from it, thinking it was just someone from high school. I talked to Robin for a couple of minutes before my mom came to check up on me, so I said bye to Robin before answering the call from my mom. It wasn't until Sunday afternoon when shit started to get crazy. My dad was always working while my mom was at home, doing what stay-at-home moms do. I was only on my computer when Robin called. So I picked up the house phone and I started chatting with Robin. While chatting, the conversation started to get very suggestive. He would start flirting with me, to which it was really weird, seeing that this Robin person sounded like he was in his 30s. I was uncomfortable by this and told him to stop. However, he wouldn't listen to me as he started talking about flirting with me in public. I was a minor at the time, so this made me really uncomfortable, especially since I was just over half his age, so something like this wasn't right. My mom could tell that something was wrong, so she stayed and listened to the conversation that me and Robin were having. I could tell my mom sensed something was wrong, so Robin and I talked for another minute or two. What he said next made not only me disgusted, but also messed up, as he made me uncomfortable. "You're my future wife, Bella. I want to see you." As soon as he said that, I hung up the phone, to which my mom heard it was Robin on the phone saw my distressed look. She had a talk with me about the man on the phone. I then explained from how it started with the phone calls on Friday, as I thought he was someone from my school. However, my mom really got upset when she heard the man said about me being his future wife. She said to me that she and I don't know who he is, so she made a phone call with my dad about the whole incident with Robin talking to me. I wasn't allowed to answer the house phone since for a while, so I asked some of my friends on Facebook if they knew who Robin is. Most of them said no, and they had no one named Robin as their friend. After my mom got off the phone with my dad, she told me that my dad would call the police to take my statement as well as my mom. An officer showed up and took our statement, and to which the officer suggested we change our phone number. Now, my parents didn't want to change their phone number since we've known it for many years, and lots of our friends knew that number. Monday was a day when the whole school was aware about this Robin guy, to which they would have to make sure I was okay, as well as make sure an officer was near the school front doors. My high school takes stalking of students seriously, so that helped me to focus on school so I wouldn't be too scared to be in school. Fast forward to 5 days later, I was playing a game on my PC when my phone rang and my mom picked up the phone. It was the same Robin guy, only this time he gave out his name saying he was James Lockhart, asking me or Bella as he called me by. The police were called again, however the phone numbers of this James or Robin person were not traceable, so they couldn't track down the numbers wherever the numbers came from. After James' fake name was said, I was not allowed to use the phone at all unless it was a call from anyone they knew would be looking for me. This went on for at least 2 weeks. However, this is when things started to get a bit extreme. It was near early October and I was just making dinner when my phone rang. My mom answered it, but instead of saying anything, she was quiet. The man on the phone gave another fake name. This time he said his name was Jim. My dad was in the kitchen when he saw my mom not talking on the phone. He headed over the phone to give this person a piece of his mind. When my dad picked up the phone, he was really angry when he replied to Jim on the phone. Since he was protecting me, I heard him yell at the top of his lungs on the phone, and I can tell he was pissed. But my mom managed to take down another phone number before my dad started ranting on the phone. "Don't you call my daughter again, and don't you dare say flirty shit to her on the phone, you piece of shit!" My dad shouted angry on the phone. Jim, however, hung up like a chicken he was, to which the police were called yet again for another report of this stalker harassment I was going through. The phone number my mom wrote down was traceable, so the police were able to track it down. However, that was the last time since my stalker called. The last time he did was just in early 2015. However, my mom did not answer the phone at this time. He eventually gave up and stopped calling me, so my parents gave me the talk about how stalkers, who are men that go after younger girls, such as girls younger as under 16. I was back to myself sometime in the spring of 2015, so I didn't have to worry about that stalker again. It has been 9 years, almost 10 years now, and I'm now 25 and I am more careful now on who I give my info to. It's unclear if my stalker had been caught or not, but I would like to think that he's in jail for stalking. However, many God knows who knows other girls and women like me out there. I just hope that I don't ever have to go through like that again, as I have a boyfriend myself, and I am doing a lot better than how I was. To that stalker, I hope you're rotting in hell for flirting with me on the phone. So I knew a person who lived in New York at the time. I think it was around Manhattan or something like that. I'll call her by the name of Jacelyn. Jacelyn was about 16 at the time of this story, and this took place when she was visiting her parents in Manhattan. Now, long story short, when her parents were divorced, neither of them could take her in as they weren't financially stable. So as of that, she ended up having to live with her aunt and uncle for a little while. It was one of the days where she was going to spend a few days with her parents. She was in her bedroom when she saw something happening. It was raining outside, so she was basically doing her schoolwork. And of course, this was around spring break, which of course she got spring homework on spring break, to which it really did suck. Spring break was supposed to be a fun time, not getting homework done. Now, as Jacelyn was doing her homework, she ended up looking over to hear that there was a tapping going on in the window. She looked over to think that maybe there was someone out there, but she couldn't see that person. In fact, it really dawned on her that there was truly somebody there. And this really frightened her, knowing for a fact that there was probably someone outside, but she couldn't find the person. At first she thought maybe it could have been a stone thrown out their window, but she couldn't find any traces or any clues to indicate that someone was there. She told her parents about it, and her parents looked, but they couldn't find anyone out there. Now, Jacelyn's guess is that could have been maybe just the wind blowing something that hit the window, or it could have been something else. Jacelyn has never had anything like this happen since then, but she still wonders today if there was really a person out there or something paranormal. So I do want to apologize if this seemed short, but this actually happened to my friend, which he happened to be used to go to the same school as me. His name was Jordan, and this took place a year after he moved out with his family to live in another city. Now, Jordan at the time was around 12 years old, and he was alone with his sister home alone while both his parents were at work. While his sister was busy doing homework, Jordan ended up getting a phone call from the house phone. He picked up the phone, and there was nothing or any sound on the other end of the line. It was just heavy breathing, to which it was really disturbing. Jordan at first thought that it could have been someone pulling a prank on him, but there was literally no sound. He even said hello a few times just to get the person's attention. However, there was nothing on the line, so he hung up. About 12 minutes later, the same phone number called again. He picked it up, but there was no one on the line. He ended up hanging up and the phone call was never called back. However, Jordan must have think that maybe the person who did call must have called either the wrong line or it might have been something else. Nothing like that has ever happened since, though. To give a bit of context, this actually happened a while ago. What I mean by a while ago is it happened to a classmate of mine, which of course we'll call her Mackenzie. This was just when Mackenzie and her boyfriend just moved in a pretty decent sized house. It had 2 bedrooms, to which it was nice, but even though Mackenzie and her boyfriend shared 1 bedroom, but they really enjoyed it. However, it was one of the nights where they were pretty much just watching movies and stuff, since they didn't really have much going on. As they were watching a film, I don't remember what the movie was called, Mackenzie ended up getting a knock at the door. Now, it was around midnight, so there was nobody or any reason why would there be a knock at the door. Mackenzie got up to go and answer the door, but when she looked out for the people, she saw that it was a woman. She looked to be in her 40s, and she looked very distressed. Now, Mackenzie wasn't so sure if she should let this person in, but knowing that maybe there was some sort of plan that this woman had, probably to have Mackenzie jumped or something, Mackenzie told the woman to please kindly leave, or if she needed help, then what did she needed. The woman didn't say anything, to which it was really odd. So Mackenzie was thinking maybe this woman did have some serious issues. This woman kind of stared at her and then turned around and walked away, and when it was out of the property, that's when Mackenzie was honest in shock. She wasn't so sure how she should feel about it, since this has never happened. Now, of course, she did call the police and explain about the woman, and of course, they had a police officer patrolling the area at night, making sure that if this woman did come back, then she would be asked to leave the property if she did return. But the woman had never returned, so Mackenzie has a few questions. Who was this woman? What did she wanted? And most importantly, what kind of plans did she had in mind if she had any? Those thoughts really still creep her out to this day, and she still gets freaked out when she thinks about it. So a friend of mine named Rebecca used to be in school, but when she was at school, this happened to her when she was home alone. While she was pretty much home alone, she did have her boyfriend, which of course he worked the night shifts, so most of the time she was alone at night. While she was home alone, she liked to play video games, and sometimes she would go on her computer and pretty much just look up stuff and even then chat with some friends on Facebook and stuff. While she was online, quote unquote, she ended up looking to see that there was her phone ringing. That's when she picked up the phone, and however, in that phone there was a deep voice. It sounded like a man, but he said, "Is this the Barley residence?" Now, keep in mind Rebecca's last name was Barley, so she said yes and asked if the person needed any help, or saying if she could help them with something. "Yeah, I'll see you at your address." Of course, that's when that man said that on the phone. This made Rebecca's color drain, knowing that whoever this was knew her address. Of course, this man appeared at the front door and started to bang on the door, trying to attempt to break in. However, luckily the police arrived and they arrested the man, but what's really surprising was how did the man got Rebecca's phone number? That still creeps her out to this day, and she even wonders what intentions did this man had, and were they good intentions or bad intentions? Those are the thoughts that still creep her out to this day, and she even wonders why this man targeted her house, but I'm afraid that's an answer that she's never gonna get it solved. She gets paranoid to this day, so she lived in that house for at least a few more months before deciding to move due to the constant paranoia of being watched. Nothing like that has ever happened since she moved out, but she still keeps her guard up and has security to make sure that whoever is out there doesn't ever try to get in or do anything to her or her boyfriend. Now, this was on a road trip that one of my friends went on. Now, we'll call her Charlotte, as she was with her boyfriend, friend Kyler, and as well as two other friends. While they were on the highway, they came across the country road. It was around nighttime, so of course they were traveling. However, they ended up coming across a cornfield as they were driving. Of course, that's when they stopped, and they end up looking over at the car to see if the person needed help. However, when they look in the car, they realized that there was nobody in there, and the car looked like it had been turned off for at least a while. Kyler and one of his friends went into the cornfield to do a little exploring, so Charlotte and the other friend just stayed back and waited for a bit for Kyler and his friend to show up. After a couple of minutes, they were getting a little concerned for them when Kyle screams out, telling them to get back in the car and drive off. Of course, they get back in the vehicle and they drove off, but once they got to a gas station, Kyler said that he did see what appeared to be a dead body of a man, no older than 20. It looked as if this man had been dead for a few hours, and that car of his must have been around for a while. Apparently a murder took place there, so At that time, they reported to the police when they got into the next city, and of course, they recovered the vehicle and discovered the body was missing when they went to go find it. They couldn't find any trace of the body, so Charlotte has to come to the conclusion that whoever this killer was probably didn't want them to find the body. It still really scares her to this day, knowing that there was someone out there who was attempting to try and hide a murder evidence. Now, of course, this is one of the reasons why Charlotte doesn't go out driving late at night anymore, as she has this fear and paranoia that there's someone could be watching her. She still isn't sure if this man was or woman was ever caught or who the murderer was, but she liked to think that this murderer is getting what he or she deserved in prison for a very long time. When I was a kid, I went to this one birthday party when I was in kindergarten. I can't remember exactly the whole thing, but I will definitely give a best description as best I can. There was this birthday party I went to, and when I was in this birthday party, they had a clown there, and of course, all the kids were enjoying themselves outside in the front yard. There was a bouncy castle and some snacks and stuff, to which they were a lot of fun. Since I went to a lot of birthday parties at the time, I really was enjoying a lot of the fun stuff that they had at the birthday party. It wasn't until maybe a few minutes later when a van pulled up. Now this van pulled up looked really creepy, and I honestly could see that it was a gray van. It was one of those large vans with the words free candy. This is common how people like to use to lure children, and it has been common for quite a while. It wasn't until a man got out of the van, which I didn't even know who he was. He looked to be maybe in his 20s, and he walked over to a child who happened to be maybe around my age. Of course, this man tried to take this kid and lure her to his van when all of a sudden the parent notices and ends up driving out and even end up telling that man to let the girl go. Of course he did, and of course he drove back in the car and drove off. Of course it was a van, but I say car because it's a vehicle after all. Now, of course, the parents ended up having to be called, and of course, first they had to stay due to the paranoia of possibly maybe that kidnapper might come back and try to attempt to kidnap kids again. The police were called after the party, but they couldn't even find the trace of the van or that man who was driving the free candy van. It could have been maybe human traffickers doing this to lure children into their van to do for their sick, twisted ways. But that van never showed back up again, and I'm just glad it never happened. I don't know what would have happened if it happened to me or anyone else. Chances are that kid could have been abducted if the parents did not act quick enough. Now, to keep this in mind, this actually happened to one of my friends who used to walk to and from places everywhere every day. Now, of course, he lived in a pretty rural area, so it was not common for him to be walking there almost all the time. As he was walking to school all the time, he noticed that there was a van, and it happened to be two men. Now, my friend at the time, which we'll call him Ivan looked to see that there were two men, looked like they were in their 40s, and they were in some sort of strange vehicle. Of course, the vehicle looked as if it looked really old, maybe back in the 80s or something. But, however, these men were looking at Ivan, and they definitely didn't seem him to look better than age. Of course, this is when Ivan started to try to ignore those men, but of course, it wasn't that. Of course, the van drove off when he got back to his place, and of course, his parents were concerned, thinking that there was definitely somebody in that vehicle trying to kidnap Ivan. It wasn't until maybe a week later when Ivan was walking home from school when that same vehicle showed up yet again. This time he decided to go to a neighbor's house and call the cops. He did that, but the van drove away from that either. And they couldn't even find the trace or any license plate of the van, besides the fact that it was a white van and it had 2 men in there. Now, of course, Ivan wasn't allowed to walk home by himself since then, but of course, it wasn't until a week later when it was on the news that 2 men had kidnapped 2 kids. They ranged from 6 to 18. So, of course, those kids were kidnapped, but of course they were found dead. This really freaked Ivan out, knowing that those men probably had plans to do something with him. Now keep in mind, Ivan was 14 at the time, so these men were sickos, and they had really, really fucked up plans for Ivan. Ivan doesn't even know what those men were planning on doing, but whatever they had planned couldn't be good. Since then, Ivan hasn't met those guys again, and he really hopes those men were in prison for a very long time. Now, of course, it wasn't until a month later when Ivan was allowed to walk to and from school by himself again. Of course, he never had anything like this ever happen since, but this comes to show you that you need to always be careful and always pay attention to your surroundings, because you never know what could happen to you if you're not even looking. Now, this took place back when a mediator was in college at the time of this story. I'm gonna call her by the name Nicole. Nicole loved going to college, and even though when she wasn't my mediator during the school year, she would be in college. At the time of this story, she was around 21, so she really loved going to this beautiful forest area with the stone bridge that she really liked working there. Sometimes she'd go there when she didn't have any classes, just to enjoy the forest and nature all around. Of course, some of the college kids go there to smoke, but most of them would walk by. Sometimes they would ride their bikes there. Well, Nicole was by herself on that bridge one day, and she decided to go do a little bit of fishing. Now, of course, there were some fish in the water, so she decided to go ahead and do a little bit of fishing. As she was fishing not far from the bridge, she ended up looking over to the other side to see that there was a tent. It looked to be like tarp, and a man came out, and he looked to be like a homeless guy. Now, Nicole didn't even know what this man was doing, but he ended up turning his attention to her and started staring at her from a far distance. Nicole was getting a little weirded out, knowing that this man she doesn't even know was staring at her. It wasn't until the man pulled out what seemed to be a large knife and he tried to go over to charge at her. Nicole immediately ran up to the bridge and ran back to the campus. When she did that, she alerted the police about it, and of course, the police went over with her to find the tarp or tent, and the men were gone. Whoever this man was clearly a dangerous homeless person, and the only thing they found under the bridge was a knife. The knife was all that they could find, but they couldn't really identify with DNA of who the man was. It was really freaky to say that this man clearly probably had an issue with Nicole there. But Nicole doesn't even know what this man could have done to her if she stayed at that bridge. What was once a peaceful, lovely place by nature that Nicole loved to hang out at, only to turn of that into a horror story. She still doesn't even know if that man was still out there or if he got arrested, but she liked to think that he got arrested and is getting the help that he needs. She hasn't been there since for the rest of the college year, and she gets paranoid now, thinking that someone may jump her. This is why she is now always carrying pepper spray and a pocket knife, just to defend herself and keep herself safe from any unwanted attention. So this was about maybe 8 or 9 years ago. This actually happened to one of my friends who used to do horseback riding. I'm gonna call her by the name Brooklyn. Brooklyn used to love doing horseback riding, and ever since she was a kid, she's always done horseback riding. Now, she was around maybe be 19 at the time of the story, maybe 18, and she was riding one of the schooling horses, which it was her horse that she was boarding at the back of the property. The property was pretty huge in the outdoor arena, so she pretty much had the whole arena to herself since it was a school night after all. Brooklyn didn't have school, so she was lucky enough to be spending time with her horse. While she was out there doing her usual warm-ups with her horse, she ended up looking to see that there was a man. Of course, this man stood about maybe 20 feet away from where the outdoor arena was, and this man definitely didn't look like he belonged in the property. He ended up looking like he was wearing a hooded jacket with some jeans, but she wasn't quite sure as to what this man's intentions really were. Of course, her horse started to get a little freaked out by this, never seen this man before, and this man did look dangerous. Brooklyn ended up looking over at the man and wasn't so sure if he noticed her or not. She decided to get her horse out of there and go talk to the barn owner and let them know about this unwanted man. By the time she got out of the outdoor arena, this man started to charge at her. Brooklyn, along with her horse, ended up galloping back to the barn when she ended up going inside the barn for the indoor arena doorway that leads outside. As soon as she and her horse got in, the man ended up stopping and walked back the way he came. Of course, the barn owner was alerted of the whole thing, and they even had the cops out just to make sure that this man was gone, but they couldn't find the man. It still really was shocking to this day as to who this man was and what he wanted, but her only guess is that this man probably had some sort of plans, and she doesn't even want to know. Brooklyn still goes horseback riding, but she's never seen this man since, and she doesn't think she ever will. To the man out there that tried to jump Brooklyn and her horse, you seriously need help, and I sure hope that you get the karma you deserve, and you deserve to be locked up. Brooklyn isn't so sure if this man was ever found or not, and of course, she doesn't even want to know if this man is still out there. It hurts her to say that once her favorite place, away from all the troubles and that, only to be turned into horror, all because of this one man who decided to try to enter the property by trespassing. A bit of an update on that. In 2023, this man was seen at the barn property again, but this time it was during the day hours when he walked across the field. The barn owner ended up getting the police again, and they arrested the guy who happened to be mentally unstable. He had some drug issues and he was a drug addicted, so of course he was taken to a mental institution. There were no traces as if this man was ever caught selling drugs or anything, but all they knew is that he was addicted to drugs. He had some serious issues, and the reason why he came across the barn was because he really enjoys being at the farm all the time. Of course, he was locked up in jail, and he won't be getting out for at least another 25 years. Brooklyn is just glad that this man was finally caught, and she really hoped that he stayed in prison for a really long time.